The forest was quiet that night, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest and makes your breath feel too loud. Fog curled around the tree trunks, thick and cold, carrying the scent of wet leaves and earth. I remember the pale glow of my lantern flickering, shadows stretching like reaching fingers over the undergrowth. Every rustle, every snap of a twig sounded unnaturally loud, and I found myself holding my breath, listening. Somewhere ahead, the wind carried a soft humming, not quite a song, not quite a voice. My heart slowed, but a part of me wanted to follow it, to see what lay just beyond the veil of fog. That's when I saw it. The forest was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes your own breathing sound loud. It was early autumn, the leaves damp with mist, the ground soft beneath my boots. I had set up camp in a small clearing, far from any trail, where the trees crowded close like they were listening. At first it was peaceful. The wind whispered through the branches, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. Then I thought I heard my name. A faint sound, almost like the rustling of leaves, but shaped into syllables I could recognize. I froze. The fog had begun to roll in, curling low along the trunks, hiding the forest floor in a pale gray haze. Shadows bent strangely in the mist. A branch might lean too far, or a tree root might rise from the earth with a curve that seemed deliberate. I told myself it was imagination. The night always plays tricks when you're alone. Yet, each time I shifted my gaze, the shadows seemed to recoil just out of sight. Something moved behind the nearest tree. Quick, almost imperceptible. A shape too fleeting to name, yet unmistakable in its presence. I held my breath, straining to hear anything else. A faint, uneven breathing reached my ears, soft, deliberate. No wind should have been moving in that direction. No one should have been there. The whisper started again, almost teasing, brushing along the edge of my awareness. I took a slow step back, my fingers brushing against rough bark. The sound came in pulses, echoing in the fog, as though the forest itself had found a voice. The firelight from my small campfire flickered, though the flame hadn't died. Shadows leapt and twisted around the clearing. Something slipped between them, gliding with a silence that made the hairs on my arms rise. I turned, expecting a figure, but there was nothing, just a swaying fog, curling around tree trunks like pale hands, and the whisper, again closer this time, curling around my neck, brushing my ear with syllables I couldn't fully understand. I wanted to move, to run, but my feet felt heavy, rooted in place. The forest seemed to inhale with me, exhaling a softness that vibrated beneath the soil. Each breath of wind carried a fragment of sound, a voice, though I couldn't locate its source. Time slipped, minutes or hours, I couldn't tell. The fog thickened, softened the edges of the world, until shapes bled into each other. The trees leaned inward, creating narrow tunnels of shadow, leading me deeper or holding me back. A low rustle to my left made me jerk my head. Nothing there. A pause. Then, behind me, just beyond the firelight, a fleeting shape ducked between the trunks. I felt it before I saw it. Cold, watching, deliberate. I whispered my own name aloud. The forest answered, softly, almost mockingly, with the same cadence, the same rhythm. I couldn't tell if it was a trick of echo or something else entirely. Silence followed, the kind that presses in, heavy and expectant. Even the fog seemed to hold its breath. I huddled near the fire, feeling the wet chill of the ground seep into my clothes. Every snapping twig, every shifting shadow, became amplified in the hush. I imagined eyes on me, flickering between trees, observing, patient. The whisper never came again. Yet the forest felt alive, as if it had been waiting for me, watching, breathing, just beyond understanding. I finally lay down on the damp earth, staring at the pale glow of the fire. The trees swayed, the fog shifted, and the wind carried faint murmurs that might have been my name or something else entirely. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I closed my eyes, listening, and the forest waited. The fog clung to the forest like a veil, softening edges and swallowing sound. I walked cautiously, boots sinking into damp earth, each step muted beneath a thick layer of moss and fallen leaves. The night had fallen fully now, but the moon offered a pale light, filtering through the trees in thin, slanted beams. Then I saw them, two small, pale eyes hovering in the fog, still, unblinking, watching. My chest tightened. The air shifted, heavier, cooler. A breeze whispered across my face, carrying the scent of wet leaves and something faintly metallic. It felt like a warning. I stepped forward. The eyes remained fixed, unyielding. Every step I took was met with a sudden, icy hush, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The ground beneath me felt unreal, soft, almost spongy, like I was walking across a world suspended between reality and something else. A movement flickered behind the fog, subtle, just at the edge of vision. But when I blinked, the eyes alone remained. Nothing else. No shape, no shadow, no hint of form. The fog thickened, curling around the trees like pale fingers. Each tree trunk stretched taller, darker, leaning in ways that shouldn't be possible. I tried to focus on the eyes, to anchor myself, but the clearing seemed to expand and contract, breathing around me. The cold wind returned, brushing my neck, whispering through my hair. I shivered, though I couldn't tell if it was fear or the chill itself. Each step forward felt heavier than the last, as if the earth itself resisted my presence. I dared a closer look. The eyes shifted ever so slightly, tracking, patient, unyielding. They weren't ordinary. They were too sharp, too precise, glowing faintly like lanterns in the fog. I blinked, and they were gone. A sudden emptiness pressed around me. No rustle of leaves, no shifting shadows. Just a soft, lingering dread that filled my chest, tightening like a cord. I called softly into fog. My voice swallowed immediately, leaving only echoes of my own fear. The clearing remained empty, yet I could feel them, those pale eyes, somewhere just out of reach, observing, patient. A faint snapping of a branch, a soft brushing against the fog. I spun, but the space was empty. Only the fog moved, curling and writhing as if it had life. I tried to remind myself it was a trick of the mind. Fog plays games. Shadows bend. Eyes can appear in the darkness when you're alone for too long. But my gut told me otherwise. I stepped backward, careful, slowly, not wanting to provoke what waited unseen. The air felt thicker now, heavier, charged with something I couldn't name. Every breath carried the faint tang of iron, and I imagined the eyes hovering, unblinking, patient. The clearing open, wider than before, but empty. A soft whisper, almost inaudible, brushed past my ear. It could have been the wind, or it could have been them. I didn't stay to find out. My footsteps retreated, muffled by moss and fog, into the clearing, and its pale eyes were swallowed again by the night. But I knew they were still there, waiting, watching. Even now, when the memory drifts through my mind, I can feel their gaze, the way it follows, patient and unyielding. Eyes that vanish when I blink, leaving only the echo of cold and the certainty that I was not alone. The forest swallowed the clearing whole. But those eyes, they never really leave. The night pressing around my small campsite, dense and still. Stars above were faint, pale pinpricks through a thickening canopy of fog. The forest smelled of wet pine, moss, and something older, something waiting. I lay inside my tent, the fabric thin against the sounds of the night. Wind moved gently through the trees, stirring leaves in patterns that almost seemed deliberate. I told myself it was just wind, just the forest settling. Then I heard it, soft footsteps circling. A rhythm, slow, measured, brushing against the earth a way that made my pulse quicken. Not loud, just enough to be certain. Someone, or something, was moving around me. I froze, held my breath, straining to hear over the pounding of my own heartbeat. The rustling grew closer, closer, and then it stopped. Silence pressed against the tent like a hand, heavy and suffocating. I couldn't move, couldn't think. The forest itself seemed to pause with me. A single branch snapped somewhere in the darkness. I jumped. My fingers brushed the nylon of the tent. No one should be out there. No one. But I could feel it. The presence, patient, deliberate, circling. Sometimes I thought I heard breathing. Other times, nothing. just a void that felt alive. I whispered to myself, barely audible, "It's just wind." The words fell hollow. The pause that followed made me question if the wind could ever sound like footsteps. A soft scuff, then silent again. The kind of silence that stretches, waiting, that carries the weight of unseen eyes. I wanted to peek out to see what was there, but my own fear rooted me in place. Minutes, or maybe hours, passed. The fog thickened, curling around the tent, pressing the night closer. Every snapping twig, every shift of air felt amplified, deliberate. I imagined shapes moving just beyond the reach of the tent's walls. Figures crouched in shadow, waiting. Then the faintest whisper, almost a sigh, brushing the fabric near my ear. I didn't dare move. The moment stretched, suspended in the cool night air. I could feel the rhythm of those footsteps again, fading, returning, circling just beyond reach. Finally, after what felt like eternity, the movement drifted away. The forest seemed to exhale. Only the wind remained, sifting through branches and leaves, teasing the edges of the tent. I lay still, listening, the pounding of my own heartbeat filling the silence. No shadows entered the tent. No shapes pressed closer. But I knew they were still there, just beyond the fabric, circling, patient, watching. Sleep never came. Not that night. Not ever really. After that, I stayed awake, tracing the soft rustling outside, imagining figures that might mirror my every breath. And the forest waited, silent, endless. The campfire crackled softly, the warmth brushing my face against the chill of the night. Around me, the forest was thick with fog, shadows crawling along the trunks, bending in ways that felt wrong. The air smelled of damp wood, smoke, and something faintly sweet, almost metallic. I poked at the fire, watching the flames dance. For a moment, the shadows seemed ordinary, just trees, just leaves. Then the flames flickered, stuttering, like they were struggling to hold on. And then they were gone. Not smoke, not ash, just nothing. The fire had disappeared, leaving only the soft glow of the fog in its place. I blinked. The shadows around me twisted unnaturally, curling into shapes that vanished whenever I tried to focus. A tree limb arched like a skeletal arm, reaching, but receding the moment my eyes met it. Every shadow moved just out of sync with the light, like they belonged to another world. I held my breath. Then a whisper, soft, barely audible. It drifted past my ear, carrying a syllable I couldn't understand. No one was there. Just fog, just trees, just the absence of fire. I tried to relight it, striking the match against rough bark. The flame sputtered, then died instantly. The shadows laughed in silence, shifting just beyond the reach of my hands. I stepped back, feeling the chill creep over my shoulders. The ground was damp beneath my boots, the fog curling around my legs. A shape passed behind the nearest tree. Quick, smooth, unseen. Only the faintest impression of movement marked its passing. The forest seemed to lean in closer. The sound of the night, rustling leaves, distant owls, was drowned in the heavy hush that fell after the fire vanished. Even the wind had stopped. A shiver traveled up my spine. I could feel eyes on me. Not ordinary eyes. Cold, patient, waiting. They moved with the shadows, drifting just out of perception. I whispered my own name, testing the darkness. The whisper returned, softer this time, curling around my shoulder. I couldn't tell if it was the fog, the forest, or something else entirely. The trees pressing closer, their trunks like dark pillars, bending unnaturally toward each other. Branches brushed against my arms, wet with fog, leaving faint trails like fingers on skin. Every shadow seemed alive, writhing, pausing when I tried to look directly at it. I tried to take a step, but the forest had changed. Paths I thought were clear were blocked by thick trunks or fog that rose like a wall. The absence of fire left everything distorted. The ground, the trees, the fog, they all felt wrong, like a painting blurred and melting at the edges. And then the whisper again, a soft, breathy exhale, drifting just behind me. No words, no shape, just the certainty that I was being observed. I sat down on the cold earth, huddling against the damp, letting the fog curl around me like a blanket I didn't ask for. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the snapping of distant twigs, felt deliberate. Every shadow leapt, twisted, vanished. I didn't move for what felt like hours. The forest waited, patient, silent, watching. The fire never returned. And I knew in the quiet chill of the fog that the night was no longer mine. The shadows belonged to something else, something patient, something alive. I stayed still, listening, feeling the weight of unseen eyes and the soft brushing of air across my skin. And for the first time, I understood that some nights are not meant to end. Some nights never release you. I lay on the damp forest floor, the moss and leaves cool against my skin. The fog had thinned slightly, revealing pale, distant stars scattered across the black sky. They seemed faint, almost hesitant, as if the night itself was holding its breath. A low hum began, barely audible at first, a vibration through the soil beneath me. It wasn't wind, not the rustle of leaves. It was deeper, older, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. I froze. The hum pulsed slowly, rising and falling, wrapping around my chest, curling up my spine. Each breath felt heavier, resonating with the faint vibration in the ground. The stars above seemed to shimmer in response, pale light trembling across the fog. Every movement in the forest was amplified. The whisper of a branch, the shift of mist, the soft snap of a twig somewhere beyond sight. And through it all, the hum continued, steady, patient. I tried to sit up, but the forest floor felt clingy, sticky, as if the earth itself was holding me down. The sound moved with me. Every step I took, every slight turn of my head, it shifted, always beneath my feet, following, guiding, watching. I wanted to call out, to break the sound, but my voice stuck in my throat. The hum wasn't loud, yet it carried an authority I couldn't resist. It demanded silence, demanded attention. Shadows stretched across the ground, twisting in patterns that didn't belong to the trees or the fog. One moment they were long and thin, the next wide and curling, as if moving independently. I blinked, and a faint shape, a dark blur, slipped between the trunks in the distance. It moved like it was floating, almost rhythmically, keeping pace with the hum. The smell of wet earth grew stronger, tinged with something metallic and sweet, like iron in the rain. I pressed my hands into moss, feeling the vibration thrum beneath my fingertips. It was alive. It was aware of me. I lay back down, staring at the pale stars, trying to anchor myself to something familiar. But the hum was insistent, rising slightly, then fading, teasing, shifting as if it had its own mind. I tried to close my eyes. Even then, the vibration followed, now inside my chest, inside my bones. I could feel it pulsing along my arms, crawling up my spine. It wasn't just sound. It was pressure, presence, something patient and unseen beneath the earth. The forest seemed to lean in, the fog curling closer, brushing my skin like cold fingers. I could sense shapes moving just beyond the clearing, figures that kept their distance, but mirrored my breathing, my subtle movements. I dared not turn. I dared not blink too long. And then, silence. The hum stopped abruptly, leaving the night empty. No rustle of leaves, no snapping twig, just a faint, lingering echo in my chest, like the last tremor of a bell. I listened. The stars above were unchanged, cold and distant. The fog shifted, curling into quiet shapes, hiding what I didn't want to see. I rose slowly, boots pressing into the damp moss. Every step seemed louder than the last, though nothing else stirred. The forest held its breath, waiting, patient and silent. I realized I could feel the absence of the hum as acutely as I had felt it before. The night had ended, or perhaps it had merely paused. The hum might return, or it might not. Either way, I knew the forest remembered me, and somewhere beneath the soil, something was still waiting. I lay my head back once more, staring at the faint stars, and listened to the forest breathe around me. The hum was gone, but the memory of it lingered. The road was narrow, flanked by overgrown grass and the shadows of trees leaning over like tired sentinels. Fog hugged the ground in soft, pale waves, Curling around the tires of my car as I slowed. The barn appeared suddenly, half in behind thick weeds. Its wood dark and aged, groaning under the weight of years. I stepped out, the air cold and damp, smelling of wet earth and decay. The wooden boards creaked beneath my boots as I approached. A low mist drifted across the ground, curling into the gaps in the barn's walls. The door hung slightly ajar. I nudged it with my hand. It shivered but didn't move further. Inside, darkness pooled in the corners, dense and still. Then I saw them, 2 yellow eyes, gleaming in the blackness. They didn't blink. They didn't move. They simply watched. A shiver ran up my spine. The air smelled stronger here. Wet fur, something sharp and animalistic, mixed with damp wood. I could feel a presence just beyond reach, something breathing, patient, calculating. I took a careful step inside. The floorboards groaned. The eyes shifted slightly, just enough to remind me they were alive. I tried to see what they belonged to, but the darkness refused to reveal more. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. Rusted tools hung in lines that didn't make sense, casting shapes that flickered and bent when I looked directly at them. Every movement I made was mirrored by a faint rustling in the darkness, as if something unseen tracked me silently. I whispered my own name softly. The eyes did not waver. It was as if whatever watched me existed in a layer of the barn that the light could not touch. I stepped back outside. The fog swallowed me immediately. Yet even in the open air, I felt it. Those eyes, following, patient, waiting. I glanced back once. The barn was empty, silent, but I knew it wasn't. The road beyond seemed longer, darker, and heavier than before. Every step I took carried the weight of unseen attention. I could feel the yellow gaze lingering, even when I couldn't see it. I pressed on, boots sinking into damp grass, fog curling around my legs. The smell of wet fur remained, faint but persistent, as though the barn had exhaled it behind me. Every shadow along the roadside seemed to bend toward me, and I quickened my pace, though there was no one there. Even after I reached the car, even after I slammed the door shut, I could feel them, waiting, watching, patient. The barn receded into the fog behind me, but the memory of those yellow eyes burned in my mind. And I knew, somewhere, something lingered just out of reach, beyond the edge of sight. The creek wound through the forest like a silver ribbon, pale in the fog, reflecting the soft glow of the moon. Mist hovered above the water, curling around stones and roots, hiding the edges of the bank. The air was damp, carrying the faint scent of wet soil and something darker, something I couldn't name. I walked along the bank, boots sinking slightly into the soft mud. The night was quiet, but for the gentle lapping of water and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Or so I thought. A shadow stepped from the fog. Tall, thin, unnatural. It didn't move like a human. It flowed, gliding closer with a deliberate patience. The water reflected only my own figure, pale and trembling, yet I could feel another presence beside me. I froze, heart hammering. The shadow did not approach directly, but matched every movement I made, staying just outside reach. Every step I took seemed mirrored, almost tauntingly, in the dim light. The creek gurgled faintly, carrying the metallic tang of something in the water. I dared not look away, afraid the shadow might slip closer. While I blinked, its form was vague, always at the edge of perception, yet I could sense its focus entirely on me. A branch snapped somewhere at my left. I turned. Nothing. The fog swallowed the shape, hiding it, but I felt its weight in the air, watching, patient, deliberate. The night air grew colder, brushing along my skin like icy fingers. I pressed my jacket closer, trying to anchor myself in the world I could still see. But the reflection in the water, though still mine, felt wrong, slightly delayed, slightly distorted, as if echoing the presence beside me. Every rustle of the trees, every subtle shift of the fog became amplified. The shadow didn't make a sound, yet the forest seemed alive with its attention. I could feel it moving with the rhythm of my own breathing, circling the edge of awareness. I whispered to myself, barely audibly, trying to remind myself I was alone. The words felt hollow. The fog thickened, curling around my ankles, brushing upward like a living thing. I took a careful step back. The shadow matched me, gliding silently, always keeping distance, always present. The water shimmered, reflecting the pale moon, yet I could sense the presence beside me, patient, unmoving. The creek narrowed, twisting, and the shadow stayed just at the edge of sight. I could hear my own heartbeat in the silence, each thump louder than the last. The fog shifted again, and for a moment I thought it might disappear. Yet the shadow remained lingering, constant. I wanted to run, to flee, but the creek twisted ahead, and the forest closed in. Every step felt weighted, deliberate, as though the ground itself resisted my movement. The shadow did not chase, but I could feel it measuring me, waiting, observing. Minutes or hours passed. The night stretched, patient and heavy, until the moon dipped behind clouds, leaving the world dim and gray. I finally slipped away from the creek, pressing to the fog, boots muddy, clothes damp. The shadow did not follow beyond the edge of the trees, yet I knew it had not left. It lingered patient, just beyond reach. I could feel its presence in the weight of the air, in the lingering chill that brushed my skin as I moved. Even now, when I recall the creek, the moon, the fog, I can feel it. The shadow waiting silently, gliding just out of sight, patient and deliberate. And I know it watches still. The trail appeared suddenly, lined with lanterns swaying gently in the fog. Each one flickered as if a shadow had just passed, casting pale, trembling light across the damp earth. The air smelled of wet wood and cold metal, the fog curling around my legs like soft fingers. I stepped carefully, boots sinking into mud, each step muffled and deliberate. The lanterns ahead trembled in rhythm with the faint pulse I felt in the fog, as though the forest itself was breathing. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the path, bending around trees, around rocks, around me. I noticed footprints in the mud, small, narrow, deliberate. They didn't match my own. They led forward, then stopped, vanished, leaving the silence heavier than before. The fog thickened. A lantern flickered and went out, leaving only darkness where light had been moments before. I froze. The quiet pressed in, soft yet heavy, carrying the smell of damp leaves and something faintly sweet, like decay. I moved closer to the next lantern. Its light wavered as if it hesitated to reveal what lay ahead. Every shadow seemed alive, curling around the trunks of trees, moving with subtle, deliberate intent. I thought I heard something behind me. A soft step in the mud, careful, patient, almost synchronized with my own heartbeat. I spun. Nothing. The fog had swallowed it again. The footprints reappeared further along the trail, still small, still deliberate, and I followed them cautiously. Each lantern flickered as if to guide me, yet the light revealed nothing but mist and shadow. Shapes shifted in the periphery of my vision, bending, stretching, retreating whenever I looked directly. The silence between flickers was almost deafening. I imagined eyes watching from the darkness, unseen but patient, tracking every careful step. The fog clung tighter now, curling upward, brushing my arms and face with icy softness. I whispered my own name softly, testing the emptiness. The trail held its breath. Even the wind had vanished. Only the faint rustle of leaves far above, or perhaps closer than I dared imagine, hinted at something beyond sight. One lantern went out completely. Darkness swallowed the path ahead, leaving only the narrow glow of the lanterns behind me. I stopped, breath catching, realizing the trail might continue or might vanish entirely. The footprints ended abruptly. The fog swallowed the ground, curling around roots and rocks. I could feel the presence of something nearby, watching, patient, deliberate, but could see nothing. I stepped back, boots pressing into mud, fog brushing my ankles, and the lanterns flickered once more. Shapes flitted between them, moving just beyond reach, just at the edge of perception. The path seemed endless, yet the footprints and lanterns hinted at someone, or something, following a plan I couldn't understand. I pressed on slowly, careful not to break the hush, careful not to breathe too loudly. The trail seemed alive, bending and curling in the fog, teasing me with glimpses of light, shadows, and movement. The final lantern ahead shivered, flickered, and remained steady. I stopped beneath it, feeling the weight of unseen eyes, patient and deliberate. The footprints disappeared entirely, leaving only my own reflection in the wet mud, distorted and trembling. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. The fog swallowed the trail, the lanterns, the forest itself. Yet I felt them, patient, watching, always just out of reach. I rested against the rough bark of an old tree, the fog curling around my legs like cold, soft fingers. The forest was quiet, or so it seemed. Each breath I took sounded too loud, echoing through the damp air, pressing against the hush of the night. Then I felt it, the weight of eyes, not visible, not a shadow, not a shape, just a presence, patient, deliberate, lingering somewhere in the fog beyond sight. I turned slowly. Nothing, only mist curling over moss-covered roots, only the faint reflection of pale moonlight on wet leaves. I told myself it was imagination. The mind plays tricks when you're alone in the dark. A branch snapped somewhere to my left, soft, almost cautious. I held my breath. No wind should have moved it that way. No one should have been there. The feeling of being watched pressed in, every muscle tensed. Every rustle of leaves became deliberate. Every whisper of the fog a signal. I shifted slightly, and a faint sound followed. Something small, quick, almost imperceptible. A snap of twigs, a brush of movement, a breath too faint to belong to the wind. I whisper my own name. The pause that followed stretched long. And then silence. Thick, heavy, alive. The forest seemed to bend around me. Shadows pooled in corners of the clearing, curling along the roots, shifting when I tried to look directly at them. Every step I thought I heard, every faint rustle, carried a rhythm that matched the beating of my heart. I pressed my back against a tree, trying to feel its solidity, its permanence. But the fog slipped around me, brushing my arms and legs with icy insistence, soft yet undeniable. It carried the faintest whisper, a syllable almost caught in my throat, vanishing before I could name it. I dared to look around again. Nothing moved, yet I could feel it. Something patient, deliberate, just beyond the edge of perception. Watching, waiting. A branch snapped again, closer this time. I froze. The silence that followed was louder than any sound. The forest seemed to exhale, carrying with it the weight of unseen attention. The fog thickened, curling around my boots, rising along the trunks of trees, brushing my face with damp chill. The presence never moved closer, never retreated. It simply lingered, patient, like a shadow cast in another dimension. I wanted to move, to run, to break the silence, but my body refused. I was rooted in place, aware of every sound, every shift in the fog, every heartbeat. Time stretched. Minutes or hours, I couldn't tell. The forest held me in its quiet embrace, alive with something I couldn't see, couldn't name, but could feel with every nerve. Eventually, I dared to breathe again, slowly, carefully, testing the emptiness. The presence remained, patient, watching. I stood, stepping softly over moss and roots, moving away from the tree. Every step felt heavier, each breath carrying the weight of unseen eyes. The fog curled closer, pressing its chill against my skin, whispering in shapes I could almost understand. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel it there, in every shadow, in every curl of mist, in the quiet pulse of the forest. Even now, when I recall that night, I feel the same weight, the same gaze lingering in the corners of memory. The unseen watcher waits, patient, silent, always just beyond reach. The cornfields stretched farther than I expected, stalks tall and thick, swaying lightly in a wind that I couldn't feel. Fog clung low to the ground, curling between the rows like soft, restless fingers. The air smelled of damp soil and something older hidden beneath the earth. I stepped carefully, boots sinking slightly into mud, leaves brushing my legs. The stalks whispered as I passed, rustling in ways that didn't match the faint breeze. At first, I thought it was the wind. Then I realized there was no wind at all. Something moved between the stalks. Quick, silent, deliberate. I stepped closer. It vanished, the quiet pressing around me, thick and heavy. Every step I took was mirrored by rustling somewhere just beyond reach, soft but deliberate, like it knew my path. I paused. The fog twisted around me, curling higher, brushing my face and hands with damp cold. A faint whisper slipped through the stalks. Too soft to understand, but unmistakably deliberate. I held my breath. Shapes flickered between the corn, too fast, too fluid to identify. Every time I blinked, they shifted, retreating just enough to remain unseen, yet always present. It felt as though the field itself was alive, breathing around me, watching me. The scent of wet earth grew stronger, mixed now with a metallic tang. I pressed my hands into the soil, feeling it soft and yielding, almost pulsing beneath my fingertips. The rustling followed me, circling, patient, deliberate. I whispered my own name into the fog. The sound returned, twisted, almost mocking, carried on nothing but the still air. I couldn't tell if it came from the cornfield itself or from whatever moved inside it. A shadow darted between two stalks, fleeting, deliberate. I froze. The rustling stopped. The silence that followed was thick, pressing against my ears, making my own heartbeat sound loud. I took another step. The stalks shifted, bending slightly, brushing my arms and shoulders. The faint whispering returned, soft, inhuman, curling along the fog. Every instinct told me to run. Every sense told me I couldn't. The cornfield seemed endless. Shapes moved just beyond my vision, always keeping distance, always watching. The fog thickened, hiding the ground beneath my feet, hiding the stalks in a pale gray haze. I followed a narrow path through the field, careful, deliberate, boots sinking in soft soil. The rustling intensified, moving in patterns that didn't match my steps, almost playful, almost deliberate. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel eyes everywhere. A faint exhale brushed my neck. Cold, silent, unseen. I spun. Nothing. The rustling resumed, fading gradually as I approached the edge of the field. The shapes vanished, leaving only the soft hum of the fog and the memory of whispered, inhuman breaths. I emerged onto the dirt road, boots wet, clothes damp, heart hammering. The cornfield remained behind me, silent, still. But I knew it wasn't empty. Something lingered in the rows, patient, watching, waiting for anyone who might wander too far. I could feel it, even now, in the memory. The soft rustle, the faint whisper, the weight of eyes that never blink. And I knew I would never truly leave behind. Moonlight spilled across the empty pasture, pale and cold, stretching shadows long and thin. The grass glimmered faintly with dew, each blade trembling in the still night. The air smelled of damp earth and frost, tinged with something darker, unplaceable. I noticed them first at the edge of my vision. Humanoid silhouettes, pale and deliberate, just beyond reach. They didn't move like humans, not exactly. Too precise, too fluid, almost predatory. I froze. Every step I considered felt heavy, weighted by the silence. The pasture seemed larger than it should have, expanding as I tried to measure distance. The silhouettes remained patient, always keeping the same distance. The moonlight reflected off their forms, sharp, angular, but incomplete. I couldn't see faces. I couldn't see hands. Only shapes that watched and waited. A cold wind brushed across my face, carrying the scent of wet grass and something faintly metallic. It whispered across the empty field, wrapping around me, brushing my neck, my arms. I shivered. Every instinct screamed to move, but my feet felt rooted. One of the silhouettes shifted slightly. The motion was deliberate, measured, almost synchronized with my own heartbeat. I blinked. When my eyes opened again, they had moved, though I hadn't noticed them step. It was patient, calculating. The air grew heavier with each step I took. Every breath felt thicker, colder. The ground beneath my boots was soft and uneven, but the silhouettes moved effortlessly, gliding just beyond sight. The moonlight cast distorted shadows, bending around them, masking the angles of their bodies. I whispered my own name into the empty field. The pasture answered with silence. Only the faint hum of night insects and the soft rustle of grass under their unseen movement. The silhouettes didn't react, didn't blink, didn't hesitate. They waited. I tried to take a step backward. The shapes mirrored me, gliding slightly closer while maintaining distance, as if marking the boundary of a game I didn't understand. Each movement I made sent a ripple through the quiet night, but they remained deliberate, patient, precise. The frost on the grass crunched softly beneath my boots, though the air itself seemed to absorb sound, leaving only the weight of presence. I wanted to look away, to break the gaze, but I couldn't. The silhouettes commanded attention without effort, patient observers in a field that felt too wide, too empty, and too alive. A low rustle, almost imperceptible, moved across the far edge of the pasture. I spun, nothing visible, yet I felt it, the awareness of eyes on me, patient, measuring, waiting. I stepped carefully forward, then paused, realizing the silhouettes hadn't advanced. The moonlight revealed only their forms, pale and angular, shapes that were human enough to recognize, yet not. Finally, I turned slowly and left the pasture, boots sinking into damp grass, heart hammering. The silhouettes stayed where they were, patient and deliberate, unmoving, waiting for the next wanderer. Even now, when I remember that field, I can feel their gaze, the way the moonlight stretched their shapes, cold and deliberate. And I know they watched still, just beyond reach, always patient. The fog pressed in thick and white, curling around the trunks of trees like soft smoke. I stumbled through it, boots sinking into wet leaves and moss, each step muted by the heavy silence. The forest smelled of damp wood and earth, and something faintly acrid, like smoke from a fire long gone. Then it appeared, a cabin, suddenly, as if the fog itself had formed it. Warm light spilled from broken windows, pale and inviting, yet something about it felt wrong. The door hung slightly open, and shadows moved inside, stretching along the walls like liquid. I approached slowly. The boards beneath my boots groaned softly, almost in warning. The air smelled stronger here, closer to the cabin. Old wood, wet earth, and something faintly sweet, almost metallic. The shadows inside shifted unnaturally, stretching across the floor, curling along the walls, vanishing whenever I looked directly. I could hear a faint scratching from above, soft, deliberate, impossible to locate. Every creak of the floorboards beneath me seemed amplified, warning me of something I couldn't yet see. The fog outside swirled, curling around the edges of the windows, hiding the world beyond. The light flickered, then steadied, revealing shapes that didn't belong to the cabin. I blinked. They were gone. Or maybe I had only imagined them. I stepped closer to the doorway. The air inside smelled heavier, thick with the scent of damp wood and stale air. The shadows danced along the walls, twisting and stretching as though alive, responding to my presence. I heard it again, the scratching above me. Soft, deliberate in a rhythm I couldn't follow. I wanted to climb the steps, to see what waited, but fear rooted me in place. Even the warm light couldn't make the shadows friendly. A floorboard creaked above, then another. Each sound was deliberate, patient, carrying a weight I could measure. The shadows moved closer, curling along the walls, reaching into the corners, vanishing when I tried to focus on them. I whispered softly, testing the emptiness, but the fog swallowed my words. No echo, only the soft, persistent scratches, the shifting shadows, the cold awareness that I was not alone. I pressed my back to the doorway, boots brushing against wet leaves outside, fog curling in. The cabin seemed alive, breathing around me, watching me, patient and deliberate. Every flicker of light revealed shapes that vanished instantly when I blinked. The fog thickened outside, swallowing the forest in pale gray. The warmth from the cabin felt hollow. The scratching above stopped. Silence pressed down, heavier than the night, waiting, patient. I stepped back slowly, leaving the doorway, leaving the light behind. The fog swallowed the cabin almost instantly, hiding it from view, but I could feel it, still alive, still watching. The forest held its breath as I moved away. Every shadow, every shape, every whisper following me softly. Even now, I can remember the warmth of the light, the cold pull of the fog, the shadows moving like liquid. The cabin remains in my memory, patient and deliberate, waiting for anyone who steps too close. The trail stretched ahead, narrow and twisting, fog curling along the edges like soft, reaching fingers. Leaves underfoot were damp, giving off the faint smell of decay and wet earth. The night was still, but but heavy, pressing against my ears and chest with a quiet insistence. I walked slowly, boots sinking into mud, careful with each step. The trees leaned over the trail, their branches swaying gently, though no wind stirred them. I told myself it was just the forest settling, just the night playing tricks. Then I felt it, cold breath on my neck. I froze. No wind, no one near, just a sensation, icy and deliberate, brushing against the back of my collar. My heart quickened. Every rustle of leaves became amplified. Every snapping twig sounded like a step behind me. I dared not turn. The trail ahead seemed endless, curling into fog, hiding the ground beneath a pale gray wash. I could hear my own breathing, harsh and uneven, and a distant owl hooting somewhere in the dark. And yet, the cold lingered, brushing closer each time I moved. I whispered softly, testing the silence. "Is someone there?" No answer, only the faint shiver of the fog moving around the trunks. It felt alive, patient, watching. I tried to convince myself it was imagination, but every instinct screamed that something unseen followed. Shadows stretched along the edges of the trail, bending unnaturally, curling just beyond sight. A low snap of a branch behind me made me jump. My pulse rattled in my ears. I turned slightly, careful not to fully face the darkness. Nothing, only the fog, curling and shifting, brushing against my legs. The sensation returned, cold, deliberate, whispering along my collarbone. I could feel it moving with me, patient, silent, impossibly close. My steps quickened, yet I felt rooted, as though the forest itself held me in place. The night pressed in heavier, denser, fog curling up from the ground to shroud the trees. Every shadow seemed alive, stretching toward me, bending, shifting. Even the trail ahead was uncertain, fading beneath the fog. I whispered again, barely audible. No reply, just a memory of the breath, the chill that lingered long after the moment passed. I pressed on, each step careful, boots sinking into the damp earth. The forest seemed to lean in, patient, deliberate, waiting for me to falter. Every sound, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves, the creak of branches, was magnified in the hush. I didn't look back. I didn't dare, but I could feel it. The cold, deliberate presence, patient and unblinking, lingering in the fog behind me. Even now, when I recall that trail, I feel the same chill, the same weight of unseen eyes. The forest remembered, and I knew in that quiet, heavy night that something had been there, waiting all along. The forest path stretched ahead, soft with fallen leaves and mist curling along the edges. The air smelled damp and earthy, with a faint trace of something older, something watching. Fog drifted low, curling around roots and rocks like ghostly fingers. I walked slowly, careful not to disturb the quiet. Every step felt heavier than the last, the forest pressing around me. The shadows leaned closer, bending in ways that didn't make sense, and I realized the path ahead had changed. It ended abruptly. I hadn't remembered it stopping. One moment, the trail stretched forward, familiar. The next, nothing but fog, twisting and thick, swallowing the ground and the trees beyond. A chill ran up my spine. The air was heavier here, dense, pressing against my chest. I felt it then, a movement behind me, soft, patient, deliberate. I spun, trying to catch sight of something, anything. The fog was impenetrable. Nothing moved, yet the presence lingered, patient and deliberate, waiting just beyond perception. The shadows at the edges of the path stretched unnaturally, clinging to the fog, bending toward me. Branches brushed my arms, cold and damp, leaving traces along my skin. Every rustle, every faint snapping twig, seemed amplified in the hush of the forest. I tried to step back, to retrace my steps, but the path had changed. It wasn't continuous. It didn't lead where it should. The forest had closed in, patient, deliberate, reshaping itself around me. A soft whisper drifted to the fog, too faint to understand, curling around my ears and neck. I held my breath. The sensation of eyes followed me, patient, unblinking, watching my every move. I stepped cautiously forward, trying to find where the path had gone. The fog twisted around my legs, brushing like damp fingers. Shadows stretched and twisted in ways impossible to follow, vanishing whenever I tried to focus on them. Every instinct screamed to run, but my body refused. I was rooted, held in place by the hush of the forest, by the weight of something unseen just behind me. The path had disappeared, yet the sense of movement lingered, patient, deliberate. I whispered softly, barely audible, "Who's there?" No reply, only the pause of the fog, curling and shifting, only the weight of unseen eyes, tracking me, testing me, patient and deliberate. I turned fully, trying to locate the movement behind me, but the path had vanished entirely. The forest had become a wall of fog and shadow. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the creak of branches, the faint whisper, was magnified, deliberate, patient. I pressed onward cautiously, following instinct more than vision. The path didn't return. The fog swallowed every familiar landmark, leaving only the hush and the lingering presence behind me. I stopped, breath catching. The forest was quiet, patient, deliberate, waiting. I could feel the movement behind me, soft, unseen, just out of reach, and I knew that the path was gone, vanished, lost beneath the fog and the patience of the forest. Even now, I remember the feeling, the fog curling, the shadows leaning, the unseen presence moving just behind me. The unfinished path remains in my memory, patient, deliberate, impossible to follow, and I know the forest waits still. The night pressed close, thick with fog curling around the trees and settling low over the forest floor. The air smelled damp, earthy, and faintly metallic, carrying the weight of something unseen. I lay in my tent, listening to the quiet, broken only by distant, faint noises that felt deliberate. Then the howls began, distant at first, echoing through the trees. Wolf calls, pale and haunting, carried on the cold night air. I tried to comfort myself. They were just wolves, far away, natural, ordinary. But one cry sounded wrong, human-like, piercing. It rose above the others, drawn out, carrying a weight of intelligence I didn't want to consider. The hairs on my arms stood on end. Every rustle of the trees, every snapping twig, sounded deliberate, as if the forest itself had paused to listen. I strained my ears, heart hammering, imagining eyes watching from the fog outside. Then I heard it, soft footsteps, almost imperceptible, moving near my tent. Slow, patient, deliberate, not on the path, not following the wind, just moving, soft and careful, circling. I froze, the air pressing heavy against my chest. The howls continued, echoing through the fog, punctuating the silence that surrounded me. Each cry lingered, followed by a pause, then the faintest rustle near the tent, reminding me I was not alone. The tent walls shifted slightly with each step outside, brushing against my fingers and arms. The fog moved along with the sounds, curling to the trees, through the grass, around me, like living fingers. I wanted to look, but fear rooted me in place. Another howl, human wolf, neither entirely clear. It carried a weight, a resonance that vibrated through the soil beneath me, through the fabric of the tent, through my chest. The footsteps continued, circling, patient, deliberate. I whispered softly, barely audible, "It's just the wolves." The words felt empty. The forest answered with silence and soft movement, carrying with the impression of watching, waiting, something patient and unblinking. The howls faded, leaving only the soft rustling of the night and the faint, deliberate footsteps around my tent. Every nerve in my body was alert, each breath heavy and loud. The fog pressed closer, brushing my neck, my arms, my legs, as if guiding me, containing me. I couldn't move. I couldn't look. I could only lie there listening, aware of the presence, circling, patient, deliberate. The forest itself felt alive, waiting, breathing with me, against me, around me. Finally, the footsteps drifted away. Silence returned, thicker, heavier, almost alive in its stillness. The hairs on my arms slowly settled, but the memory of those steps remained, curling the back of my mind like smoke. Even now, when I recall that night, I can hear it, the distant, impossible howl, the softest footsteps, the weight of the forest watching. And I know that somewhere in the fog and the darkness, the presence remains patient, deliberate, waiting for the next wanderer to hear the call. Fog clung to the forest, curling along the trunks and wrapping the ground in pale, shifting sheets. The trees leaned close, their branches swaying softly, brushing against one another in the stillness. Every step I took sank slightly into damp leaves, the smell of wet earth and moss heavy in the air. I noticed them first at the edge of my vision, faint silhouettes, indistinct, flickering between the trees. They kept their distance, yet there was something deliberate in their presence. Watching, patient, I stopped, breath-catching. The fog swirled around my boots, curling up my legs like soft fingers. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of twigs, sounded deliberate, purposeful, measured. I stepped forward, cautious, and the silhouettes retreated. I blinked. They were still there at the edge of perception, maintaining their distance, observing, always observing. The forest felt alive with their attention. Shadows bent unnaturally along the fog, curling over roots, twisting around trunks. I could feel their gaze, cold, distant, patient. Even when I tried to focus directly, they avoided it, flickering just beyond sight. A low exhale brushed past my ear. No wind, no one near. The fog swallowed it almost instantly, leaving only the weight of presence. I whispered softly to myself, testing the stillness. Nothing replied, only the faint, deliberate rhythm of their movements at the edge of the fog. The silhouettes seemed almost human, though something about them was wrong. Their motions were too precise, too deliberate, too patient. They mirrored no one I had ever seen, yet I could feel their awareness, tracking me with quiet intent. I moved slowly, careful not to startle them. Each step was measured, mirrored in the forest, echoed by the curling fog. I could feel their distance shrinking slightly whenever I turned my head, though they never approached fully. Branches brushed my arms and legs, damp and cold, leaving subtle trails like soft, ghostly fingers. Every snap of a twig sounded deliberate, every rustle of leaves deliberate, matching some rhythm I couldn't understand. The silhouettes shifted, retreating, but never vanished completely. The forest seemed endless, thick with fog, yet the shapes always returned, patient, deliberate, waiting. I pressed on cautiously, boots sinking into soft earth, fog curling around me like a living thing. I stopped at a small clearing, fog thick and heavy, shadows pooling at the edges. The silhouettes remained at the perimeter, flickering faintly in and out of sight. Their presence pressed in, patient, deliberate, watching, always watching. I whispered one last time, barely audible, "I see you." The fog didn't respond. The silhouettes didn't move closer, but I felt them, patient, deliberate, observing from the edges of the forest. Even now, when I remember that night, I can feel the weight of their gaze. The soft, flickering presence in the fog, the deliberate patience of shapes that never approach. And I know that somewhere, just beyond reach, they wait still. Fog curled thick along the forest floor, weaving between trunks and tangled roots like pale smoke. The night was still, heavy, and the air smelled of damp earth and moss, with a faint tang of something older, something hidden. I walked slowly, boots pressing into soft, wet leaves, careful with every step. Then I saw it, a small door, standing alone among the trees. Its frame was aged, worn, yet pristine, as if untouched by time or weather. I didn't remember seeing it before. It had simply appeared, pale and deliberate in the fog. I approached cautiously, every step muffled by moss and mist. The door stood slightly ajar, the dark space beyond swallowing the pale light of the moon. I reached out, fingers brushing the handle. Cold, smooth, solid. A whisper drifted from inside. Soft, faint, curling along my ears, almost inaudible. I leaned closer, heart hammering, straining to hear. The words were not clear, yet I felt their meaning. Patient, waiting, deliberate. I pulled my hand back, suddenly unsure. The forest around me felt denser, heavier, shadows curling toward the door as if guiding me away. I blinked. The door wavered in the fog, uncertain, but remained where it stood. I touched the handle again. The whisper grew slightly louder, brushing my ear, curling around my neck. I couldn't understand the words, but the intent was clear, watching, patient, deliberate. Something waited beyond the frame, just out of reach. I stepped back, breathing uneven, and looked around. The forest was silent, fog curling, twisting, pressing in from all sides. Yet the door remained, impossibly present, impossibly deliberate, unmoving in the mist. I reached out one more time. The handle was colder than before, almost biting. The whisper brushed closer. Then I turned away for just a moment. The door was gone, vanished entirely, as if it had never existed. I spun back, heart hammering, searching to the fog. Nothing, only trees, moss, and the weight of unseen presence pressing against me. I could feel it. The memory of the door, the intent of something just beyond sight, patient, deliberate. I stepped forward cautiously, boots pressing into wet earth, fog curling around my ankles. Every shadow seemed heavier, bending in ways that made no sense. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting, patient, deliberate. I whisper my own name softly, testing the emptiness. No reply, only the lingering sense of something unseen, waiting, watching, beyond the edge of perception. Even now, I remember the door clearly. Not its frame, not the handle, not the space beyond, but the weight of intention, patient and deliberate, lingering long after the door vanished. The forest had shown me something impossible, something that waited just out of reach. And I knew it was still there, patient, deliberate, waiting for the next wanderer. The pond lay still beneath the pale moonlight, water so calm it mirrored the sky perfectly. Fog drifted low across its surface, curling in soft, restless patterns. The air smelled damp and earthy, tinged with something faintly metallic, as if the soil itself remembered long-forgotten things. I knelt at the edge, boots sinking slightly into the soft mud. My reflection stared back, pale and quiet, yet something felt off, a subtle delay, almost imperceptible, as if the figure in the water moved on its own. I blinked. The reflection mimicked me too slowly. A pale shadow stretched across the surface. I shivered. The fog curled closer, brushing my hands and face with cold dampness. The forest around me was silent, every sound absorbed by the heavy fog. Leaves barely rustled, water barely lapped, yet the pond felt alive, holding its breath. I could feel eyes, patient and deliberate, watching from beneath the surface or just beyond sight. A soft ripple moved across the water. I hadn't touched it. The reflection remained, too slow, too deliberate, bending reality in subtle ways I couldn't comprehend. I whispered my own name softly. No answer, only the ripple, soft and insistent, moving in impossible patterns. The fog thickened, curling around my boots, climbing my legs, brushing against my chest. I could feel the chill of unseen breath, patient, deliberate, waiting. Every instinct screamed to step back, to flee, but my feet were rooted, held by fascination and unease. The reflection did not blink. It mirrored me, yet not entirely, movement stretched, delayed, unnatural. I leaned closer, trying to understand, and felt the cold air press heavier, wrapping around my shoulders like soft fingers. The pond remained still in outward appearance, yet beneath the surface, something shifted. Shadows moved in impossible ways, twisting, curling, patient, deliberate. The water held its secrets tightly, hiding what was beneath, allowing only hints, teasing awareness. I stepped back cautiously, boots pressing into soft mud. The reflection followed, delayed, distorted. Every ripple seemed intentional, almost knowing, almost alive. The fog clung tighter, curling higher along the pond's edge. I whispered again, softly, "It's just a reflection." The words fell hollow. The figure in the water remained, pale and deliberate, patient and unblinking. Even as I turned to leave, I felt it, eyes in the fog, a presence pressing from the edges, waiting. The pond lay still again, mirroring the pale moon, silent and calm. But I knew it wasn't empty. Beneath that surface, beneath the fog, something watched, patient, deliberate, waiting for anyone who lingered too long. Even now, I can feel the chill of that night, the pull of the still water, the delayed, unblinking reflection. The pond holds its secrets. Patient and deliberate, always waiting. Just beyond reach. Fog hung heavy in the forest, curling around tree trunks and roots like restless fingers. The air was damp, earthy, and faintly acrid, carrying the subtle scent of old wood and decay. I stumbled forward, boots sinking slightly into wet leaves and soft soil. Then I saw it, a cabin hidden behind a curtain of fog, pale light spilling from its windows. It seemed abandoned, untouched for years, yet somehow alive. The air around it felt thicker, heavier, pressing in as if the forest itself warned me to stay back. I approached slowly, careful with each step. The fog clung to my clothes, cold and damp, curling around my arms and legs. The scent of old wood grew stronger, mingling with something faintly sweet, almost metallic. Footprints appeared in the dust near the doorway. I hadn't seen anyone. They led across the floor, small and deliberate, then vanished as though swallowed by the cabin itself. A rocking chair moved slightly, creaking softly. I froze, heart hammering, eyes wide. The chair stopped the instant I gasped, leaving only the hollow echo of silence behind. Shadows shifted along the walls, stretching unnaturally. I could feel their weight, patient, deliberate, observing from the corners of the room. Every floorboard groaned beneath my careful steps, each sound amplified in the hush. I stepped closer to the center of the cabin, boots brushing against dust and debris. The fog from outside seeped through cracks in the walls, curling across the floor, wrapping around my ankles. I whispered softly, testing the emptiness. No answer. The footprints reappeared, leading toward the window, then disappeared once more. The rocking chair swayed slightly again, patient, deliberate, as if acknowledging my presence. I could feel the gaze of something unseen, just beyond reach, watching every careful step I took. The cabin seemed alive, breathing around me, waiting. Shadows moved without pattern, curling along the walls and floor, vanishing when I tried to focus. Every creak, every shift of the fog felt purposeful, deliberate. I pressed my back against the wall, boots cold and damp. The fog outside swirled closer, wrapping along the board and floor, brushing against my face. I could feel the presence lingering, patient, deliberate, watching from everywhere and nowhere at once. Finally, I turned slowly, stepping toward the doorway. The cabin seemed to sigh, floorboards groaning softly, the rocking chair still. The footprints vanished entirely, leaving only the memory of movement, patient and deliberate. I stepped outside, fog curling around me, boots sinking into wet leaves. The cabin remained hidden in the mist, pale light spilling faintly, shadows shifting along its walls. I could feel the forest gaze on me, patient, deliberate, lingering long after I moved away. Even now, when I recall that night, I can feel the weight of the hidden cabin, the footprints, the rocking chair, the shifting shadows. The forest keeps it alive, patient and deliberate, waiting for the next wanderer to step too close. I found the walkie-talkie lying in the mud, half buried among damp leaves. Its plastic casing was cold and slick, clinging to my fingers like it had been waiting. The fog curled around me, pressing low, soft and damp, heavy with the smell of wet earth. I lifted it, turning the dial slowly. Static crackled, sharp and bright, in the quiet night. I held it to my ear. Then I heard it, a voice, soft, deliberate, unmistakable. My name, just a whisper, curling along the fog, brushing my ears, brushing my neck. I lowered the walkie, heart hammering, certain it was imagination, but it whispered again. Closer, clearer, patient, deliberate. The static hummed beneath it, wrapping the sound in the night, carrying it through the fog. I froze, boots pressing into damp leaves. The forest seemed to hold its breath, every rustle, every snap of twigs amplified in the hush. The fog pressed closer, wrapping around my arms and legs like living fingers. I whispered my own name softly. No reply, only the soft hum of the static, the faint brush of presence around me. I could feel eyes in the fog, patient and deliberate, waiting just beyond reach. I raised the walkie again. Static, then the voice, nearer this time, curling along my ear, not shouting, Not angry, just deliberate, patient, deliberate. It knew I was alone. I held my breath. The footsteps of the forest seemed to align with the cadence of the whispers. Every shadow in the fog fell heavier, moving just beyond vision, patient, deliberate, watching. The voice faded slowly, replaced only by static. I pressed the walkie to my chest, cold plastic against skin, heart hammering. The fog swirled, thick and dense, curling around me, brushing my neck, my arms, my legs. I knew it hadn't left. The presence lingered, patient, deliberate, waiting. I dropped the walkie to the mud, letting it land silently. Still, the weight remained, the soft, deliberate presence that had brushed against me through the static. I could feel the eyes in the fog, tracking, patient, unblinking. Even now, when I think back, I can hear it. The soft crackle, the whisper of my name. The forest keeps it alive, patient and deliberate, waiting for the next wanderer to pick up the call. Fog curled thick and low along the forest floor, drifting between trunks and tangled roots like soft smoke. Every step I took pressed into damp leaves, the earthy scent heavy in the air. The trees leaned close, shadows stretching long and thin, bending in ways that didn't make sense. I noticed movement first at the edges of my vision. Shadows flicker in the fog, shifting in and out of sight, never fully forming. Patient, deliberate, watching. I stopped, breath catching, boots pressing into soft earth. The fog clung to me, curling around my legs, brushing my arms with cold dampness. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, seemed amplified in the hush. I whispered softly, testing the stillness. No reply, only the shadows, patient, deliberate, flickering at the edges, always just beyond reach. The fog pressed closer, wrapping around the trunks of trees, hiding the trail beneath a pale gray wash. I could feel eyes on my back, patient, unblinking, waiting for me to move. Every time I glanced behind, nothing but mist and bending shadows. The silhouettes shifted, flickering, twisting along the forest floor. They didn't move like humans, yet they mimicked the rhythm of my steps, subtle and deliberate. Each motion was patient, calculated, almost testing me, marking the boundaries of my path. I took a cautious step forward. The shadows mirrored me, keeping distance, moving deliberately with the fog. Every branch brushing against my arms, every soft crunch of leaves beneath my boots, seemed magnified, deliberate. A faint rustle behind me, too soft to identify, made my pulse quicken. I froze. The shadows held. Patient, deliberate, waiting. The fog thickened further, swallowing the ground, bending the light from the moon, and every shadow stretched unnaturally, curling around roots and trunks. I whispered again, barely audible, "I see you." No response, only the patient, deliberate movement at the edge of perception. I pressed on, each step cautious, boots sinking into soft, damp earth. The shadows followed, flickering, circling, always keeping just enough distance to remain unseen. The forest seemed alive, breathing with me, moving with me, patient and deliberate. Finally, the fog began to thin, curling along the edges of the path like it was reluctant to let go. The shadows lingered for a moment longer, then vanished slowly into the mist. I exhaled, heart still hammering, aware of every sound, every subtle movement in the fog. Even now, when I recall that night, I feel the same weight, the patient, deliberate gaze, the flickering shadows just beyond reach. The forest keeps its watchers alive, lingering in the fog, patient, deliberate, waiting for the next wanderer to step into the hush. The barn loomed ahead, half hidden by fog curling along the fields like restless fingers. It was old, darkened by rain and time, and the air smelled of damp earth and rusted metal. I stepped closer, boots pressing into soft mud, leaves brushing my legs, careful with every movement. Inside, rusted tools hung unnaturally straight along the walls, silent and still. The air smelled stronger here, wood, metal, and something faintly acrid like old smoke. Shadows pooled in corners, bending against the walls in ways the light shouldn't allow. A figure darted between beams. Silent, fast. It mirrored my every movement, timing so precise it was impossible. I froze, every muscle tight, breath shallow. The barn was still, yet alive with presence. Every creak of the boards beneath my boots sounded amplified, deliberate. The shadows shifted, curling along the walls, brushing near me, patient and deliberate. I tried to look directly at the figure. It vanished instantly, replaced by emptiness. Yeah, I could feel it, patient, deliberate, watching. Every rustle of the tools, every faint shift of the air carried its attention. I stepped cautiously toward the center, boots pressing into dust and debris. The figure mirrored me, keeping distance, patient and deliberate, never fully revealed. The barn seemed alive with anticipation. Shadows bending, walls whispering with unseen movement. A low exhale brushed past my ear, cold and deliberate. I froze. No wind, no one near, only the weight of presence, patient, deliberate, unblinking. The figure moved again between beams, circling softly, always just beyond sight. I whispered, barely audible, testing the emptiness. No reply, only the shifting shadows, patient and deliberate, echoing in the silence. The barn seemed endless, a maze of shadows and beams, alive with subtle movement. I pressed on cautiously, boots sinking slightly into soft with dust, fog curling through cracks in walls. Every step echoed, every breath amplified, every shadow bending unnaturally. Finally, I turned toward the door. The figure mirrored me one last time, then vanished into emptiness. The barn sighed softly, settling back into stillness, patient and deliberate. I stepped outside, fog curling around me, pressing damp and cold against my skin. Even now, I can feel the weight of that barn, the movement, the mirrored presence, the patient, deliberate watching. It lingers in memory, waiting quietly, just beyond reach, patient and deliberate, for anyone who enters its silence. Fog pressed low along the forest floor, curling around trunks and roots, soft and cold against my skin. The air smelled damp, earthy, and faintly metallic, thick with the weight of something unseen. Every step I took pressed into wet leaves, boots sinking slightly into the soft soil. Then I saw it, a humanoid figure standing in the mist, still, patient, its eyes unblinking. I froze, heart hammering, every nerve taut, every instinct screaming. The figure didn't move like a human. Its posture was deliberate, perfect, impossible, as if it had been waiting for me all along. The fog swirled around its legs, bending and curling in unnatural ways. I tried to step forward. The figure mirrored me. Though it didn't move, it was patient, deliberate, watching. Every breath I took echoed too loudly, but the figure remained still, unblinking, impossible to ignore. The air smelled heavier, thick with damp earth and something acrid, almost metallic. I could feel its gaze on me, unblinking, patient, deliberate. Every shadow around it seemed to stretch toward me, twisting in ways that made no sense. I whispered softly, barely audible, "Who are you?" No reply, only the stillness of the figure, the fog curling around its form, the weight of presence pressing in. A branch snapped behind me. I spun. Nothing. The figure hadn't moved. The mist swallowed the sound, but I could feel the awareness, patient and deliberate, lingering. I stepped cautiously closer. The ground beneath my boots was soft and damp, the smell of wet leaves sharp in my nostrils. The figure remained still, unblinking, waiting. I blinked. It didn't. Every instinct screamed to turn and run. But something held me, tethered by fascination and unease. The forest itself seemed alive, breathing around me, shadows bending with a presence, patient, deliberate. I whispered my own name softly, testing the silence. No answer, only the weight of unblinking eyes, patient, deliberate, watching every careful movement. I stepped back slowly, boots sinking into the wet soil. The figure mirrored me for a fraction of a second before the mist hit it partially, still patient, still unblinking. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, seemed connected to its awareness, deliberate, calculated. Finally, I turned and walked away, heart hammering, every nerve taut. The figure did not follow. Yet I could feel it, patient and unblinking, lingering in the fog behind me. Every memory of that night carries its gaze, impossible to forget, patient, deliberate, unblinking. Even now, when I recall that moment, I can feel the weight, the stillness, the fog, the unblinking eyes that watch me with impossible patience. The forest keeps it alive, patient and deliberate, waiting for anyone who dares to wander too close. The last fire burned low, flickering softly against the dark trees. Smoke drifted upward, curling into the night, mingling with the fog that pressed along the forest floor. The air smelled of ash and damp wood, thick and heavy, carrying a quiet weight. Shadows stretched beyond the firelight, long and thin, bending in ways the trees shouldn't allow. I could see shapes moving just beyond the glow, patient and deliberate, keeping their distance yet clearly aware of me. Every crackle of the fire sounded amplified, each pop echoing softly across the empty forest. I listened. Soft rustling came from all directions. Leaves brushing, branches snapping, movements deliberate, patient. I told myself it was the wind, but the hairs on my arms stood on end and the chill of unseen presence brushed my neck. I tried to focus on the fire, the warm glow beneath my hands. Shadows twisted over the ground, curling unnaturally, vanishing when I blinked. Each flicker revealed glimpses of figures, always at the edge, patient, deliberate, watching. Footsteps, a soft shuffle in the underbrush. Closer, then gone. The fog swallowed it, but I could feel it. Eyes in the dark, patient and deliberate. I whispered softly, testing the emptiness. No answer, only the soft, deliberate rustle of leaves, the faint shifting of shadows, the weight of watching pressing in. I shifted the fire slightly, poking the embers, and the shadows responded. They twisted, stretching, curving with the flickering light. Every movement was mirrored, deliberate, patient, unseen but impossible to ignore. I tried to step back, leaving the warmth behind. The forest felt alive, pressing around me, fog curling along my boots, wrapping my legs, brushing my arms. Shapes moved just beyond the firelight, patient, deliberate, unseen. Every creak of the trees, every crackle of the embers, felt like communication I couldn't understand. I sat still, breath shallow, listening to the night. The fire burned low, casting long, thin shadows over the trees. The shapes remained, patient, deliberate, always at the edge, observing, waiting. Finally, the fire hissed and dimmed, smoke curling higher, fading into the fog. Shadows deepened, curling, moving imperceptibly. The forest swallowed the last light, but I could feel the watching, patient, deliberate, surrounding me from every side. Even now, I remember the last campfire, the flicker of embers, the shifting shadows, the soft, deliberate rustle of leaves. The forest keeps its watchers alive, patient and deliberate, waiting in the dark for anyone who lingers too long. The trail stretched ahead, shrouded in fog that pressed low against the forest floor. Leaves clung damp to my boots, the smell of wet earth and moss heavy in the air. The trees leaned close, their trunks twisting strangely, shadows bending in ways the light shouldn't allow. I followed the path carefully, boots pressing into soft soil, fog curling around my ankles. It was familiar, yet something felt wrong. The forest was quiet, but the hush pressed in, patient and deliberate, as if waiting. Then it vanished. The trail beneath my feet simply stopped, swallowed by fog and darkness. I blinked, but it didn't return. Every tree seemed to lean closer. Every shadow stretched, bending, reaching just beyond sight. The forest had reshaped itself around me, patient, deliberate, unyielding. I stepped forward cautiously, searching, boots pressing into soft earth, leaves brushing my legs. Nothing, only fog curling low, twisting along roots and rocks, hiding the ground beneath a pale gray wash. A faint laugh drifted through the mist, soft, distant, inhuman. It wrapped around the trees, curling along my ears, brushing my neck, patient, deliberate. I froze, every nerve taut, heart hammering. I whispered softly, "This isn't real." No reply, only the fog, thick and curling, swallowing the trail entirely. The laughter drifted again, closer this time, teasing, deliberate. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the edges of the fog. I could feel eyes, patient, deliberate, unblinking, watching from every side. Every step I took forward seemed to shorten the distance between me and something unseen. The forest felt endless. The fog pressed in from all directions, curling along my legs, brushing my arms, wrapping around my chest. The laughter faded, replaced by silence, thick and heavy, patient and deliberate. I turned, searching for the trail behind me. Nothing. The trees had shifted, the path erased, swallowed by fog and darkness. I was alone, yet aware of presence, soft, deliberate, unblinking. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, seemed magnified, deliberate, marking my movement. The forest waited, patient, deliberate, watching. I whispered my own name, testing the emptiness. No answer, only the weight of the fog pressing in, the distant echo of laughter, the unseen eyes at the edges of perception. Even now, when I recall that night, I can feel the vanishing trail beneath my feet, the forest reshaping itself, swallowing paths, erasing everything familiar. The fog curls around my memory, patient and deliberate, leaving only the sense of endlessness. And I know the forest waits still, patient, deliberate, for anyone who dares follow a path too far into its quiet, fog-draped heart.